Hello, my wonderful learners. I hope you are still safe and healthy. I am still teacher EBRAHIM, back with general studies and communication skills. And I need to remind you, this program is brought to you by the Rwanda Education Board in partnership with MASTERCARD Foundation, together with Inspire, Educate and Empower Rwanda. And you must remember that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are home, studying from home because schools are closed since March of this year, 2020. And therefore, we shall be studying from home through the radio and TV until September 2020. We are still talking about our topic of democracy and good governance. And in our last class, we talked about the concept of good governance. We looked at what good governance is, and we said it is efficient and effective delivery of public services, where the government ensures that people receive what they need to receive efficiently. The services are given to them very efficiently and very effectively. Now, today we are going to look at the three arms of state government. We are going to understand what are functions of each arm of government are and how these three arms of government can operate independently but still serve the interests of the citizens and the nation together. Remember that you need to have a notebook and a pen in hand ready to write down notes for revision in your personal study time. You also need to clear away any noise and any other forms of disruptions. In our last lesson, I asked you to find out what the arms of government are and what the functions of each of them are. I hope you did that, and that is now the time to find out if what you discovered is correct or not. But I believe it is, because I know you are very smart people. First of all, let us understand what state governance entails, what makes up state governance, because it comes in various forms such as environmental, regulatory, participatory, non-liberal governance of states. And various actors in state governance come in, and these include the government, intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, private sector and civil society organizations. We looked at these ones in our last lesson, where we looked at the different actors in what we call governance, where the people who participate and enable governance or the service delivery to the people. Now, remember, the government is the main actor in what we call state governance. The government still ensures is at the top, because we said there are different actors. We have the government, the state government, we have the private sector, and then we have what we call the civil society organizations. And these ones are all serving under the control of what we call the state government. Now, the government, because it is at the top, executes its responsibilities guided by the principles and the provisions of the Constitution. This Constitution gives leaders the mandate and the authority to perform their responsibilities. Now, the Constitution also orders these leaders to obey the rule of law and serve the citizens efficiently and effectively. Therefore, you need to remember that governments are based on what we call a structure. And this structure takes the form of three powers or three branches. The branches are the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. Each arm of government has separate powers or separate power, which enables what we call decentralization of government services to the people. And you need to understand what decentralization means. This is the fact that the power to govern the country and provide services is distributed through the different levels of government, from the president to the last village chief. All these leaders share a certain level of power, and all of them share the responsibility of serving the people. This responsibility is not centered around one person, the president. The president shares most of his powers with the other leaders with whom he works in government. This reduces the work on him, and also it increases the speed at which the services are provided to the people, efficiency and effectiveness. Because if all these services are supposed to be provided, but they are provided by one person, that means they're going to be so slow, because one person cannot do all the work, or one office of the president cannot do all the work of running the country. So he shares most of his power with the other people, and then retains some of the power that allows him to do his work. The separation of powers between different arms of government also gives room for what we call checks and balances between the three arms of government. This enables government to uphold accountability and transparency in its day-to-day operations. The government, when you share these powers with different people, you give responsibilities and duties to certain people, it is easy to hold these people accountable, because you will know this person is responsible for transport. This person is responsible for distributing relief to poor families. This person is responsible for health. So there's a person that you can hold accountable. There are different people. If something goes wrong with one person, the government can still continue operating.
Come along and play with us.
Now that we understand what governance is, let us look at the three powers of or arms of government. First, the executive. This executive is made up of the president, the prime minister, the ministers, ministers of state, and all of these make up what we call the cabinet. And then secondly, we have the legislature, which is also known as the parliament. It is made up of the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies. The Senate and the Chamber of Deputies are the ones that make up what we call the parliament. Now, lastly, the judiciary. This arm of government is made up of ordinary courts, starting with the Supreme Court, the High Court, the intermediary courts, the primary courts, the high instance tribunals. There are some tribunals and at the grassroots down there in the villages. And all of these are under what we call the ordinary courts, and they are run by the judiciary. And then under the judiciary, we also have what we call specialized courts, such as the military court, the commercial high court, and the lower commercial courts. All of these are under what we call the judiciary. Now, those three, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, are the three arms or the three powers of government. I hope you are enjoying this as much as I am enjoying it. Let us now look at the advantages of having these three arms of government. When you break down the government, or when you break the government into three arms, you have to understand, first of all, that there is the principle of separation of powers, which gives the government a chance to function smoothly. The separation of powers is enabled with the breaking down of the government into these three arms. Each arm of the government has its own responsibilities. And we have a few advantages of having the three powers of government. Number one, it makes coordination and administration very easy, because each department or each arm of the government has its responsibilities. So it is very easy for the government to coordinate and administer, because if one arm of the government is dealing with coming up with policies, another one is in charge of ensuring these policies are turned into law, and another one is in charge of ensuring that this law or these laws are enforced, then the process is smooth. And it facilitates what we call division of labor and reduces the concentration of power in one single arm, which means the power is shared and everyone is accountable to the other. There is division of labor, so everyone has his duties and they perform their duties according to how their duties have been divided or assigned to them. It reduces and eliminates the possibility of what we call abuse of power. The executive cannot abuse power because it is still accountable to the judiciary. The judiciary cannot abuse power because it is accountable to what we call the legislature. If the president and his cabinet need to pass a certain law, they cannot just pass it overlooking what we call the legislature. And if the parliament breaks the law, these MPs and senators and the members of parliament, or the senators and the deputies, can be taken to court and they will be punished by what we call the judiciary. So nobody can abuse power. And it also enhances efficiency and smooth functioning of the government. People work efficiently, and we said there is smooth running of government. Now, it promotes the principle of what we call checks and balance, where every person is accountable. You keep everyone, everyone has to account to the other. The executive has to report to the parliament, the judiciary reports to the parliament, it reports to the executive, the parliament reports to the executive, everyone reports to the other. It allows what we call transparency and accountability. We have talked about all this. It provides quality service to the people. The government will, because everyone is accountable, everyone is doing their work transparently, and there's no abuse of power, the people are the ones who benefit the most because they enjoy quality service. Then lastly, it eliminates or reduces incidences of corruption in the management of public affairs. There will be very limited corruption, bribery and corruption, because if a member of the executive wants to do something, they cannot give you a service and charge you. They cannot do that because they know that you can go and report them to the courts of law, which means there is reduced chances of corruption.
Come along and play with us.
Now, the question you need to ask yourself, how do these three powers or arms of government operate? In Rwanda, we have the legislative arm. The legislative power, or the power to make laws, is vested in parliament. This power rests with parliament that consists of two chambers, the chamber of deputies and the senate. Parliament has the responsibility of debating and passing laws. Then we have the executive power of running the country or implementing government policies, is vested in the president and his cabinet. Then the judicial power rests with the Supreme Court and other courts established by the Constitution and other laws. And these courts together are what we call the judiciary. These three branches are separate and are independent from each other. The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary all operate independent of each other. But there is what we call being complementary. They support each other. Much as they are operating independently, they are still what we call complementary. They support each other in serving the people of Rwanda. Now, let us talk about the functions of the three powers of government in detail, one by one, and we will start with the executive. The executive formulates and suggests policies. It manages public property, maintains peace and security in the country, and promotes basic human rights and fundamental freedoms within the country. The executive is also responsible for the appointment of public servants and harmonizing people's needs and planning for them. All of this is the work of the executive. Managing public property, ensuring there is peace and security in the country, and promoting basic human rights and fundamental freedoms, appointing public servants and ensuring that people's needs are taken care of. And it also plans for the country, such as the planning process involves what we call budgeting. So the executive also budgets for the country. Let us look at what the legislature does. This branch of government has the duty of debating motions and issues of local, national, and international importance. Making decisions on collecting revenue and expenditure also is the duty of the legislature. The legislature also has the power to approve war declarations. If the executive wants to go to war, they must seek permission from the legislature. You cannot take the country to war as a president without asking for permission from the legislature. If you do, that is called abuse of power. That is why these powers are broken into three, such that everyone is held accountable. And then the legislature also has the power to approve government policies. They discuss these policies, see how these policies can work, ask the executive to explain how these policies are going to be implemented, who is going to benefit, how the rest of the country is going to benefit, and how much money it is going to cost. Before these policies are implemented by the executive, they must be approved by the legislature. Then lastly, the judiciary. Their main duty is interpretation of the Constitution. The judiciary is the guardian of the Constitution. Remember, I told you the Constitution is the law of the land. All the laws that govern the land are called the Constitution. Everyone must be held accountable by that Constitution. And then the judiciary is the guardian. The judiciary interprets these laws and ensures if you break the laws, they explain to you how you broke the law and how much your punishment is going to be. How big. If it is a punishment, how long you're going to spend in jail if it's a jail term. And then the judiciary also helps in developing the laws, because they work together with the legislature and the executive to formulate these laws and develop them. And they give advice on questions of law. They advise the government, the whole of it, the legislature and the executive. If there's a problem in terms of interpretation of the law, everyone will go and ask the judiciary to interpret it. Now, as we conclude, we need to remember that the three powers of government are able to promote transparency and accountability in their operations by exercising the principle of separation of powers, which enables each power to check the other. This also keeps away the concentration of authority and tyranny or dictatorship at bay. Like the dictatorship is not going to take place if the judiciary and the legislature and the executive are independent of the other. Nobody can assume total authority over everyone else. I hope we now understand how governance works and how the three arms of government relate with each other. In our next lesson, we will talk about the role of democracy in promoting individual citizenship. Since we have talked about democracy already, I now want you to find out what citizenship is and what one needs to qualify as a citizen. I want to thank you for being such wonderful and attentive learners. And because I want to find you safe and healthy in our next lesson, I want to ask you to listen to your parents and the guidelines given to us by the government in regard with the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope to see you next time. Good luck.
Goodbye, 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 teacher. Goodbye, children. See you next time. Goodbye, 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 teacher. Goodbye, children. See you next time.